evening. Welcome to the October 10th, 2012 meeting of the Lake Forest Plan Commission. I'm Jack Reisenberg, Chairman of the Commission, and at this point I'd like to introduce the other members of the Commission. To my far right, Commissioner Culbertson. Next to me, Commissioner Lay. To my far left, Commissioner Kuchman. Then Commissioner Carris to his right, and next to me, Commissioner Ziccarelli. From the city staff, Ms. Zerniak and Ms. Newman are with us tonight. Our first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the September 19th, 2012 Plan Commission meeting. Are there any corrections or requests for clarification? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. The first item before the commission this evening is a preliminary overview of the progress to date on the development of a bicycle master plan for the city of Lake Forest and presentation of introductory material. The draft plan is scheduled to be presented to the commission for review and public hearing at the November meeting. Kathy, do I have to ask for conflicts of interest, or?
No,
I wouldn't
you're
think
not
so.
taking any action.
Sure, okay. Presentation from Ms. Newman.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm very excited to be here to be part of the Bicycle Master Plan project team and to present to you some key ideas and concepts that have been developed through the public process to date in preparation for a more formal presentation to the Commission in the next 30 to 60 days. It's my hope that this introduction will give you a better understanding of what a bicycle master plan is and give you an opportunity to provide some input so that we can be better prepared when we come back with the bicycle master plan in the coming months. We've gone through a pretty robust public process to date. The process started last fall of 2011, after several residents expressed interest in making the community a more bike-friendly place to be, and the City Council directed staff to facilitate the development of a bicycle master plan. At that time, a project team was formed. The project team consists of staff from community development, parks and recreation, engineering, and public safety, as well as support from other community agencies. We've been working with Lake Forest Open Lands, Lake County DOT, as well as the Village of Lake Bluff. The concepts that I will present this evening are really a result of the public input that we've received at this point, that resulted from a community survey, public workshops, meetings, conversations with the resident focus group, and also work with city staff. At this point, the project team is working diligently to produce a master plan document for you to review. At this point, we don't have that information to share with you, but we wanted to give an introductory overview of where we are today and give you just a little high-level approach to this project. At the same time that the bicycle master plan is being presented, a recommendation to update the transportation section of the city's comprehensive plan will also be prepared and presented to the Plan Commission. To give some background to that, a copy of the existing or the current comprehensive plan section relating to bicycling was provided to you in advance of the meeting. So just to give kind of a bigger picture of bicycling and bicycle planning and give you a sense of what's giving some momentum to bicycling these days. Nationally, there's really been a push and interest in creating healthy communities in terms of providing adequate open space, recreation opportunities, walkable business districts and downtowns, and more recently, especially with rising gas prices, an interest in providing facilities that help with bicycling through a community. To that end, several government agencies have developed and approved complete street policies with bicycle design guidelines that really look for accommodations for all modes of transportation within a right-of-way. Both Lake County Department of Transportation and IDOT have adopted complete streets policies, so you may see some improvements throughout the region that relate to state and county roads that provide pedestrian and bicycle improvements. Additionally, there's adequate federal funding available at this time for bicycle and complete street projects, and it's become more readily available to local municipalities through recent acts that have been passed. As noted earlier, this process really began out of local interest from residents, and so far throughout the process we've experienced a lot of enthusiastic residents and with a lot of interest and information to offer on the topic. So what exactly is a bicycle master plan? The simple answer to this question is a bicycle network, or a way to plan for future improvements. The focus of the bicycle master plan that the city's been working on is to evaluate the existing street network and identify routes that provide critical bicycle connections within the community. It's also a way to determine ways to enhance those connections and really make them more bike-friendly for the community. What bicycle advocates and other communities have found is that a bicycle master plan should be much more than the network or the system of streets where people can bike, but it also should lay out a foundation for the community. So we are following that lead. We're laying out our plan based on the 5 E's of bicycle planning. These include engineering, which is what are you going to build, education, teaching people how to share the road, encouragement, getting people excited about bicycling, enforcement, how to enforce the rules of the road for bicyclists and motorists, and then evaluation. It's our hope that this is really a dynamic document, something that's revisited as components are implemented or things change in the community, to ensure consistency with the vision of not only the master plan but also the city's comprehensive plan. We are creating a master plan as an implementation tool that will allow us to think broadly and plan for improvements within the city limits that make sense locally as well as regionally. So we have been working closely with the village of Lake Bluff, as well as had some contacts with other surrounding communities. One primary reason for a bicycle master plan and ultimately updating the city's comprehensive plan is to really raise awareness of bicycling and highlight the importance of healthy amenities in Lake Forest. The most obvious benefit of an established bicycle network is connecting people to key destinations within the community. These would include recreational destinations like parks, a hospital, the beach, the central business district, train stations. And in addition, studies have shown that providing for bicycling in a community really does have positive impacts on the health of a community, the environment, as well as promotes economic development. One of the recurring themes that came out of the public input for the bicycle master plan is that Lake Forest and Lake Bluff has good bones. We have good assets. The existing recreational trails in Lake Forest primarily run north and south. Lake Forest is fortunate enough to have several of these off-road bike paths. The McClory Road, the McClory Bike Path follows the Union Pacific Railroad line, and the Skokie Valley runs along ComEd easement along Highway 41. These off-street paths really create the core of the proposed bicycle network in the master plan. In addition to those assets, the off-road trails, Lake Forest has a lot of low-traffic, low-speed streets that are suitable for bicycling and really contribute to the bicycle network. This idea that the city's bicycle network starts at your driveway, so you can hop on your bike and get wherever you need to go using the city's street as well as off-road paths. It's important to recognize this aspect because if bikes are to become a viable transportation option in Lake Forest, based on the input that we've received so far, the network really needs to go where the cars go. And for the average adult rider, studies have shown that it's actually safer to be on the street than it is to be on the sidewalk. So in theory, just looking at Lake Forest on paper, Lake Forest is a very bikeable community. There are a lot of key destinations within a short radius, a 2-mile radius, or a 15-minute bike ride. And that really brings us to the key issues that have been defined throughout this process. These include a lack of a safe east-west connection. There are several barriers and challenges that come up when you're trying to get from one end of the city to the other. Barriers like railroad crossings, major roads, and the bicycle master plan can help identify those areas and propose some improvements that could help ease that transition from east to west. There was also a key issue that there's a need for better awareness and encouragement for cyclists and motorists to share the road. There's a need for improved bicycle parking at key destinations and a strong desire to improve access to the central business district and the train stations. So those, through the public process, those have been the recurring themes and the highlights from the bicycle master plan that we're developing. So again, through this public process, work with the resident focus group. 5 primary goals really came out and set the framework for the document that you'll be reviewing in the coming months. I think it's important to present the goals at this stage because it really does set the context for your review coming up. So just to touch on those, the goals were to generate awareness and acceptance of bicycling in Lake Forest, to connect major destinations within Lake Forest and also provide access to established regional trails, to provide safe transportation options for people of all ages, to protect the environment for the long term by promoting bicycling for transportation use, as well as promoting bicycling as a healthy, safe, and convenient way to get around town. So in order to accomplish those goals and the work with the focus group and residents, we've established what we're calling a bicycle toolkit. It's a way to identify certain aspects that can be used to help create a more bike-friendly environment for cyclists. Things like signage to identify and direct bicyclists, pavement markings to help bikes and cars share the road, pathways along major roadways where they're appropriate, as well as the importance of maintaining and enhancing the existing trail system that we have in place. Just a quick look at the bicycle network and how the toolkit can be used to help improve some key connections that were identified during the public workshops. Similar to the process with other master plans, as money becomes available and individual components come forward, particular routes that have been called out in the plan will be evaluated and considered for enhancement to help improve bicycle safety. As you can see, let's see, this is just a couple highlighted routes: the Everett Old Elm route, Wesley Road, Route 60, and then key connections between the 2 bike paths. Those are the primary east-west connections that were called out as important throughout the public process to date. So we're still fleshing out those details, and they'll be brought back to you in the coming months, but I did want to share that piece of the master plan. So next steps. I'll leave you with some ideas to think through as you review the information of the bicycle master plan for the upcoming meeting. I know you don't have the plan in front of you this evening. I just want to give you a little preview and help you think through the plan as you get the information. So things to think about. Are the routes and facilities proposed appropriate? Does the proposed bicycle network adequately connect Lake Forest and the region? Does the plan encourage bike connections that maintain the character of Lake Forest? And of course, is the plan clear and easy to understand? So tonight, I can't necessarily provide the answers to you this evening, but I am listening for any questions or requests for clarifications that would be helpful to you and important moving forward with the bicycle master plan. Thank you.
Questions or requests for clarification from commission to either to Megan or to Ms. Erniak? Commissioner Kuchman, we'll start with you.
My only question would be, is there a draft budget for the creation of the plan?
The plan itself is actually a low budget piece. It's a high level document. It will call out areas for improvement. As I mentioned, there's several federal grants that can be applied for as certain road projects are brought forward. We can apply for enhancements to help with the bicycling aspect of those projects. So the funding is actually something that we're hoping would come through grants.
Entirely.
Grants, and it would be evaluated as part of the capital improvement budget.
Commissioner Carris?
I do, I have a couple. Well, first of all, this is one of the more fun initiatives that we get before us, so thank you. As far as the time frame is concerned, what is your timing for completing the plan and then implementation? I know as availability of grants are concerned, but you're planning on finishing by year end, getting approval?
That's our hope. Our hope
Okay.
is for the Plan Commission to review it, and ultimately the City Council will grant their approval by the end of the year.
Great. And then I saw that you have markings as part of, pavement markings. Is there any contemplation of additional, not sidewalks, but additional east-west paths as well, constructing? I saw Wesley Road. People travel pretty quickly down there. I see a lot of bikes on the sidewalks through there. Is there contemplation maybe for another strip to be added for safety reasons, or is it all around markings?
I will certainly take note that you have questions about different aspects of the facilities that will be used on the route. I think in general, certainly looking at different levels of improvement is part of the master plan, and to identify whether or not a sidewalk or a side path is the appropriate use for that particular connection, or if something other would better benefit the bicyclists.
Okay, thanks. And then as far as the last question, I promise. I'm known for asking a lot of questions. My children and I will ride to Market Square periodically, and bicycle parking is an issue. So this, I'm assuming, has some accommodation for additional bike racks and things like that throughout the area.
Correct. I think parking will be a major part of the plan.
Great. Thank you.
Commissioner Ziccarelli?
Yes, thanks. Just one question maybe. It looks like the master plan is taking shape to consider using city-controlled roads, state-controlled roads, like maybe Route 43, county-controlled roads, which would be like Everett Road. As the city goes forward with a master plan that involves streets that are of our own, is there a cooperative effort, do you think, to take what we pass as a master plan, and how will the county and state react to that?
Sure. I actually think this would be seen as a positive for the overall system. The county is in the process of, is always in the process of gathering information from the municipalities to better inform their master planning. So we will certainly share this information with the appropriate parties and communicate as road projects come forward our connections to make sure that things that are happening on state right-of-ways make sense within our network.
Commissioner Culbertson?
Megan, you put up a map earlier of, I think it was supposed to be the master plan, is that, or?
It's a draft that
It's
was
a draft.
presented at an open house.
Do we
yes.
get a chance to see that, or are you keeping us in suspense till?
That will be part of what's presented to you
Okay.
In the coming months. We
All
really
right.
want to hash it out and make sure we're giving you accurate
It
and
was a
up-to-date
teaser.
information.
Thanks.
It's just a teaser.
Okay.
They try to bring us along slowly.
Yeah.
They don't want
I see
to
that.
confuse us, but anyway.
Good idea.
Yeah, sure, it is a good idea, yeah. Commissioner Lett?
Yes, Megan, one question with a couple of sub-components. How detailed versus conceptual on a continuum will the plan get? In other words, will it contain a lot of detailed implementation steps and timetables? And how will that, and if so, how will that dovetail into the city's capital improvements plan?
Sure. We're looking at including a section prioritizing different routes. There are certainly some projects that can happen quickly and with limited or minimal funding. We can look at those in relationship to the capital improvement project and see if they fit in. With respect to the plan, I think it'll depend on the section, whether we're talking broadly about a category of streets or a specific project that's being proposed. For example, concurrent with this bicycle master plan project, there is a grant that the city applied for a while ago to connect on the McClory path through the central business district. There's some work that's happening on that, so this plan may have a little bit more detail
Okay.
on projects like that, and projects like Route 60 that we really don't know what form it's going to take, but we know it's an important connection. It may be more vague.
So in some respects, it will provide project-specific thoughts and ideas.
In some instances, yes.
Thank you.
I have no questions. Public testimony? Okay, okay. I'm sorry, it's just like, yeah, and with all your close friends out there. Yeah. Let's just go right to number 10, in terms of the process. We'll combine 10 and 11, which is final questions from commission to petitioner or staff, combined with commission discussion and final comment. That's okay. Ms.
I just had
Yes.
one comment to add, and I think Ms. Newman alluded to it, but I wanted to emphasize it, that one thing this master plan will do is it will dictate that when, from an engineering standpoint, we are looking at resurfacing or improving certain roadways, if this plan is adopted, this plan will then require that, much as the state programs already do and the county programs do, that when any road is being looked at, one of the factors that must be considered is the bicycle master plan. So in part, it kind of opens that door and establishes that requirement that engineering projects just can't go off on their own. This will be one of the factors that will need to be considered. So I just wanted to reemphasize that. I know you mentioned it.
Thank you.
Very good. So again, we'll go to final questions and comments. Commissioner, starting with Commissioner Culbertson.
Oh, I look forward to receiving your proposal. When would that be at the next meeting?
The next 30 to 60 days, yeah.
Okay. Very good.
Commissioner Kuchman?
Will the proposal include a list of the people that contributed to the draft plan?
Yes, we
Whether
can certainly,
community members or
Certainly.
organizational heads or whatever?
yes.
Just curious.
That's fine. I guess we will look forward to November. This is very contemporary, and in many regards, it's very much back to the future. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
And Kathy, there is no commission action on this at this point, so we'll just move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a review of section 46-10 of the city code pertaining to fences, and consider amendments if determined to be appropriate. Once again, we'll dispense from conflicts of interest or ex parte comments and go right to, Kathy, I guess, presentation from you.
This is before you really to just do a check-in before we move forward. At either the last city council meeting or the one before, the city council directed staff to initiate the plan commission's review of the fence provisions in the code. And Commissioner Carris talked about the bicycle master plan being fun. Fences might not be quite as fun, but it is a section of the code that, as far as we can tell, has not been reviewed, updated, modified in any way for at least 20 years, and perhaps that goes back 30 years or more. Recently, there's been a couple situations where fences have been constructed in ravines. And in the past, when those types of requests have come in, staff from community development as well as engineering, we've been able to have discussions and really find a workable solution. In a couple recent cases, we weren't able to do that, and some fences were actually erected in locations that generated a number of phone calls to aldermen. those calls generated calls from the aldermen to us. And as we looked at our code provisions, we found that they're pretty limited, but they're also pretty loose. There's a number of places in those provisions where it talks about height, it talks about location, and then it says the Director of Community Development can waive that if it's found to be appropriate. In today's climate, that kind of language makes certainly our city attorney nervous. So the city council specifically directed that the Plan Commission review the provisions with a particular eye toward whether there should be direct language limiting or prohibiting fences in ravines. But going beyond that, it seemed like as long as this section of the code is only a page and a half, unlike the subdivision chapter that the Plan Commission reviewed a couple of years ago, it seemed appropriate to step back and look at this entire section of the code. The code right now addresses height, it addresses landscaping, it addresses setbacks. It doesn't address things like materials, although it talks about fences along streetscapes being landscaped. The setbacks are a bit in conflict because the code requires landscaping, and yet with fences set back only 3 or 4 feet, sometimes there isn't adequate room to do landscaping. So our recommendation to the Plan Commission is that we start this process by you directing this to the Building Review Board and Historic Preservation Commission. Both of those bodies deal much more closely than the Plan Commission does with individual properties. They may have comments on materials, they may have comments on setbacks. I believe you may hear some comments regarding whether fences should have different regulations if they are within historic districts. Neither of those bodies would take any official action, but the comments from those bodies and any public comments they hear, we would then use to suggest some modifications and then bring those modifications back before the Plan Commission. You would hold a public hearing, make a recommendation, and send your recommendation on to the City Council. And so what we're really looking for tonight is, does that process sound appropriate? Do you want to request input from the Building Review Board and Historic Preservation Commission? Would you rather have those discussions begin at this level? So just looking for your direction on process tonight.
Questions from petitioner or staff, beginning with Commissioner Lay?
Kathy, do we know whether either of those two bodies, Building Review Board or Historic Preservation Commission, have any thoughts or ideas in terms of how the current ordinance might be revised?
We have not had that specific discussion with them, but what I can tell you is that from time to time, they have petitions that come before them that include fences, and they have identified, they have questioned on certain streetscapes, is it appropriate for a fence to be set back just 3 feet and to be 7 feet tall? And if so, is it appropriate for that fence to be fully site obscuring, or should there be some limited views in? So they have had discussions that lead back to the ordinance. So I think they would have some good input, some good insight.
Initially, before we tackle it here at the Plan Commission?
I think both of those bodies are at a closer level than the Plan Commission is related to fencing. So that may be helpful to you rather than you kind of reinventing the wheel and trying to learn what they've already experienced. So I think that would be helpful as a starting point, and then you kind of do the higher level. If something is getting too restrictive, that's really where the Plan Commission comes in at that higher level and makes those calls.
Commissioner Culbertson?
I have no questions.
Okay. Commissioner Ziccarelli?
The only thing that comes to mind is potentially, with the two groups looking at it, does engineering need to look at it in the event of corners for visual for vehicles at some point?
Yes, absolutely. Internally, we would, as we develop the amendments, we would certainly include staff from our Public Works Department, not only engineering, but I think right now the code doesn't have any language about easements, and that's something as a request for a fence comes in, we look at that, but someone who's developing plans for a fence might not even know to ask that question. I think we'd also want to talk to public safety. So we would form an internal staff team as well to offer input, and we'd work with the city attorney.
Do you need this body's recommendation to proceed along specific lines to draft the recommendations?
The fence provisions are in the zoning code, so it is under the purview of the Plan Commission. So yes, staff is really coming to you to get approval on the process.
Apparently, Commissioner Kuchman didn't think that you had any questions or comments. Commissioner
No,
Carris.
that was an important
But
question.
but we will entertain any questions on your behalf.
Thank you. I do have one, and you talk about setting up a special committee from staff. Is it possible to just set up a quick task force between the three bodies to go through this and come up with a joint recommendation as opposed to bouncing from committee to committee? Would that be a more expedited way of going about getting a resolution?
I think the way we anticipated this moving before the board is simply giving them a brief memo, giving them the language, and asking them to identify issues. We don't expect each of those groups to create the language. So I think a short discussion by the Building Review Board, a short discussion by the Historic Preservation Commission. I don't think this is something that really needs a special task force appointed. I know that worked well with the wireless provisions that will also be coming to you soon, but that was a much longer.
Yeah, and I'm not big on special task forces. It just seems to me it might be more expedited process for everybody, including yourself, to get, interested parties from the various commissions in a room, hammer out language or considerations or what have you, and then you can move forward, so.
We'll consider that. Why don't we see how many concerns there are, and if
Okay.
it seems like something that warrants that, if we just get some feedback, we may be able to hammer out that language pretty quickly.
Great,
But
thank you.
sometimes committees generate more work rather
Right,
than less.
absolutely, understood.
But,
Mr. Chairman,
point heard.
may I ask a question along those lines?
Yeah, let me just finish up with Commissioner
Sure.
Cushman. Did you have any additional questions? I'm going to come back to you.
No problem.
Okay,
Thank you.
Commissioner Culbertson.
Will the Plan Commission itself have an opportunity to offer suggestions with respect to the code?
Absolutely. Any suggestions we get at this front end of the process, we will put together a draft, and that draft will then become the work of the Plan Commission. You will hold a public hearing on it. You will essentially consider the input that we've gotten from Building Review Board, Historic Preservation Commission, any individuals who testify between now and then. We will put that all in a draft, and then it'll be yours to accept, to modify, to
We
reject.
can offer our input at that time. as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, meaning, we'll have final approval of what the.
Understood.
Sure, okay.
I just
Okay.
wanted, I'm trying to define the appropriate moment when the plan members themselves can
Mhm.
submit suggestions or.
It's at the end, right? It's at the end?
We'll bring you draft language, and then
Yeah.
it'll be yours to do with what
to
you see
modify
fit.
or
But
yeah, or whatever.
yes, you will have
Yeah.
full license to change anything.
Just one more time, Kathy, explain what the process is.
If you choose to follow the staff recommendation, what we would do is we would, in very short order, bring this before the Building Review Board, ask them for their thoughts, for comments. We're not gonna ask them to look at the specific language or rewrite it, but to give us their input on what are the concerns, what are the conflicts that have come up with respect to fences. We do that with both of those boards. We would then check internally with staff about any concerns or issues they have. We would prepare some draft language, and we would bring it back to you. Plan Commission would hold a public hearing. You could choose to make modifications, continue the matter. Ultimately, you'd make a recommendation. It would go to City Council, and that would be at the point at which they'd consider an ordinance would actually puts the changes to the ordinance in effect.
Sure. Okay.
May I ask one more question?
Yeah, well, why don't we just go to final comment, and can you?
Sure.
Yeah, final questions, final comments, and starting with you?
No, it just occurred to me that, I've been involved in our homeowners association for 15 years, hard to believe. an awful lot of, the two central issues that come up, at least before our HOA, after the subdivision is completed, are lighting and fences. Those are the two burning issues. It seems to me there's a lot of input to be garnered from homeowner association experience on this subject. Is there any methodology whereby we can get some input from homeowners associations?
We could certainly look at the declaration of covenants from various homeowners associations. Obviously, many homeowners associations have much more strict limitations on fences, to the point of some do not permit fences. So that actually is a really good place for us to look, to do research. We've also begun pulling some fence ordinances from surrounding communities.
It also occurs to me that a lot of the determinations and fences, again, in our subdivision, have come by way of precedent, really. It's the framework is in the covenants, but the decision becomes, it becomes either case by case, or it becomes the policy of that subdivision by precedent, not by rule. And I'll just give you a simple example. We do, in our subdivision, we don't permit fences on common property lines without the consent of all the contiguous property owners, if they can get approval from the other owners. It's just one example. I'm not saying it's one that should be incorporated into ordinance or into statute, but it's that kind of input. You get an identification of what the problems are oftentimes. I mean, people want to build a fence on their property line, and then somebody wants to build a different kind of decorative fence on the same property line. So you have these two fences that are separated by the setback. These are issues that come up on a case-by-case basis in a homeowners association and need to be resolved. I'm not sure ordinance really addresses that, but.
I think it would be difficult for the city to put in regulations that go as strict as some homeowners associations. So those stricter requirements would always be controlling, as long as a homeowners association wanted to enforce them. I think that historically the fence ordinance has tried to strike a good balance between what works for the streetscape, what works between neighbors, what respects private property rights, and declaration of covenants can go further than that. So we're not going to solve every problem with this,
Right.
And it's probably not something that you need to spend 6 or 9 months on. But some work on it, I think, would be helpful both for homeowners and for the staff in implementing it.
Mr. Chairman, one last question. Section 4610 does not, I don't notice any language with respect to pools and fencing. Is that in a separate part of our city ordinance?
That is,
And
that's a
what
life
section
safety
is that?
issue. That's actually a state requirement, the requirement to have a self-locking, self-closing, self-locking fence around a pool.
Okay.
But a good point, we might want to refer to that, do a reference in this section, because that is often a piece that gets overlooked. When someone puts in a pool, they don't realize they need to meet that life safety code.
Commissioner Lake,
I have no further comment.
Commissioner Kuchman, Commissioner Carris, Commissioner Ziccarelli. I guess my only final comment was, I think it's clearly appropriate to buck this over to building review and historical preservation. They tend to get into these types of items. I've always felt that we kind of operated a strategic, almost a 3,000-foot level, where BRB and historical preservation gets down to the 30 feet level, and more into the execution, and I don't want to use the word minutia, but really the kind of minutia. So I would certainly recommend that we do that. The other thing that I would recommend is that we don't go after an ant with an elephant gun. Okay. So now what do you need for us? A motion?
I don't even need a motion.
Oh, okay.
I think I heard direction that we should proceed, taking into account your comments, and come back to you as quickly as we can with
Sure.
something concise, simple, and something that covers everything that should be covered.
Okay. There will be no public testimony. I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Let's go home.
Sure.
Thank you.
Hmm?
Sure.
Yeah. Get to watch the Tigers.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Likewise.